Hi, Benja.
Hi, Van. How's it going?
Yeah, good. Do you know, are we having like a call today, or it was cancelled, or we're waiting for Rob to join?
I'm not actually aware. I know last week's was cancelled, like officially, but I'm not aware whether there's been any changes this week or not.
Because I'm a little bit outdated on Discord. This Discord is still weird for me. I need to figure out how to use it.
Yeah.
Nothing was in group, right?
No, as far as I know, nothing has been. For the Discord, one of the good ways of dealing with it is if there's channels that you're just not interested in, then mute them. And then they won't like mess up your unreads.
Yeah. Can I unsubscribe somehow? Because I see like huge number of channels automatically. Some discussions. Can I like remove them?
You didn't used to be able to, but nowadays I think you can. However, as a TSC member, I'd recommend that you don't, because you might need to pop into them to do any moderation or anything like that. So instead, and I know it's a bit of a manual process, you just right click each one and just do mute until I unmute. That way you can still pop into them, but you don't need to see them most of the time.
So they like, okay, so I cannot hide them from a list. I can just like mute them.
No, what I do is I actually just collapse all of the folders, and that way it only shows me the chats that have got unread messages in them.
And if you mute them and collapse, you basically will see only stuff that you not muted.
Exactly.
Okay, now it's final, because I'm like over how you go there, and it's like 1 kilometer long list of channels.
Yeah, definitely feels like it could be improved for communities like the GraphQL Discord. But that's the way that I'm dealing with it at the moment.
Okay, makes sense. Hi, Rob.
Hi, Rob.
Hey guys, you're talking about Discord?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find it very overwhelming. I think I went through and muted almost all the channels when I joined it.
Do you also collapse the categories?
No.
I find that works quite well. So it just hides everything away unless there's an unread in there. And then you can use, I think it's Control K. Yeah, Control K if you want to skip to a particular channel. But then rest of the time, like I don't really see much unless there's actually unread messages. So a lot less overwhelming that way.
Yeah, that's helpful.
So I think we can start if we have something on agenda. It's kind of weird because it's only 3 of us.
Yeah. I mean, from the last meeting, I want to spend more time thinking about the how we're going to write the spec. And I feel like we can simplify it and maybe get to the point where we do cover both early and delayed execution, maybe just by putting that algorithm for filtering payloads in an appendix. But I feel like we can do it in a way that's not overly complicated and doesn't do mutations. But I need to spend time thinking about it, and I haven't had the time to do that yet.
One quick question, because for me, working group discussion was similar to discussions we had, except one new thing I heard there. It was interesting to hear like history flashback about like deferrable and defer. Yeah, it's a bit of trivia, but it was interesting. And the second thing, which is more practical, is that idea that in single thread applications, like deferred execution makes sense because like initial part of resolver is usually CPU bound, and like later it's IO bound, but initially like resolvers. I had the same idea in my mind, like without formulating it so clearly. And what's impressed me is that it's not only like my opinion. So what do you think about this? Is it like arguments that, because previous discussion was structured in a way like early execution is always kind of better, but we choose deferred execution because of consequences, and like it's hard to debug, third-party code, data order, you need to like change data order to parallel order or to something else. So do you still think we universally think people would want to do early execution in single thread applications?
Yeah, I was thinking about that too, and I wonder like how much still like delayed execution feels like a very broad way to go at it. So I wonder like how much I would want to like try like, you know, I think I'm pretty convinced that in single threaded you don't want to just actually synchronously execute deferred stuff, that but if everything waited like a you waited to like process next tick, that would at least put it behind other synchronous stuff. But I wonder like maybe it's like a maybe you want like a smaller, like a slightly bigger delay than that, but not going as far as deferred, as like delaying until everything else is completely done. Because if you only need to get ahead of like the other CPU blocking stuff, if that's the case, that most resolvers are CPU blocking in the beginning and then IO blocking at the end, then it should be fine to just get ahead of like the CPU blocking part, right? Not waiting for all the IO stuff to finish. But I don't know.
So
yeah, I'm not fully convinced in either way about it.
yeah, I just want to point out like a funny moment for me. Benji, when you wrote with like Fred initially, you outlined like 3 possible solution: early execution on next tick, and delayed execution. And you said like second one, early execution delayed by 1 tick doesn't make sense. And you, but now we're thinking it's actually like early execution delay by 1 tick is universally better than early execution, right? So
I don't think that's what it said, and maybe I was wrong.
maybe I read it like a month ago. Maybe I'm confusing something, but
Yeah,
we all
you're right, Ivan. That is effectively my opinion, that the option 1 and 2, where we wait a tick, are essentially the same. That said, what Rob has said here is true, right? If the synchronous computational logic is a big factor, then just waiting that tick could be a nice little save. But I still it doesn't solve the other various issues that I've raised. And also, like, the moment that any of those resolvers have a network fetch in them or something, or some asynchronous work, like, there's still going to be processing of the received data. So the way I see it is there's computation heavy at the beginning of a resolver and at the end of a resolver, with like asynchronous network stuff in the middle.
Yeah, and we cannot, like, because of the nature of GraphQL, there is no like realistically zero chance for fine tuning per query. Meaning, like, you can fine tune particular resolvers, but even like in very complex environments, you don't know how much particular resolver would take, and you cannot like optimize particular queries. You just get random set of fields from client basically. So like we cannot do optimization.
Yeah, you also have the issue that some of the proposed solutions at the moment, like awaiting a promise in the resolve info, which I suggested, have their own performance overheads. Like, even just awaiting a promise is expensive in JavaScript.
Yeah.
Right? It's 10 times as expensive as just doing something synchronously in general.
It's not JavaScript. So like any async await, meaning like kind of like resumables, generate a resumables async await, which is like a single thread thing, but you capture the stack. It would be the same in like any language. So like maybe Rust is faster, but Rust also have async await, and you cannot beat computer science. If you restore a stack, and if you switch like execution processor cache to execute another piece of code, every time you do like with switching, you spend resources. So
Yeah.
I would say it's not JavaScript specific. It's specific to resumables in single thread environment.
And my concern is I would want to make sure that for a query that doesn't use stream and defer, it should not be slower now that stream and defer exists than it was before, or at least not significantly slower. We can have, the cost of an if branch. That's not so bad, but introducing more tick jumping and stuff like that would not be ideal, which isn't what's being proposed, to be clear. But if you did this, if you put this promise there, I guess we could just set the promise to null, and then you'd be awaiting null, which I assume V8 would optimize away, but I'm not entirely sure, and I don't know, exactly what the deal is there.
To clarify, because of like speed, there is like two speeds. Speed of particular request, it's like initial and default part, and there is like speed, meaning like throughput of the servers. How many requests it can process. So it's like two different speeds. You're speaking about throughput, right?
Yeah, I was talking, actually both. Full request latency, because anytime that you do an await, there's generally an increase in latency. So that's the total length of the request time, right? But also there is computational overhead as well in managing that, which will reduce throughput also. Okay. And we also, when we're talking about stream and defer, we have a third one that we care about, which is the latency to the arrival of that initial payload. And that is what stream and defer is meant to be optimizing for, right? To give you that data as early as possible.
Yeah, I think we have disagreement on that. We discussed it last time, right? So I'm in the same camp with you. I'm like, if you specify a deferred, you want your initial part to be as fast as possible, and you're okay to wait. But there is like non-blocking understanding of defer, meaning like I want to run this and I want to get initial response, but like I want to get like response and I don't want to wait. You understand, right? It's like difference between like not starting it and not waiting for it.
Yeah, definitely. So there's two competing things here. There's either we optimize for that initial response payload, or we optimize for not increasing the total request latency. And they are kind of competing. We can either go fully one way, fully the other way, or we can have a hybrid approach that tries to achieve the best of both worlds, trading off a little of each.
I'm like, I'm thinking, what's interesting. So it's not the new problem, right? It's not like people will want to use defer, and previously if they didn't solve these issues. I expect like people probably right now solving the same issue by just splitting into two queries, sending one query, getting a result like from this query in IDs or something, and pushing it into second query, and second query execute. Compared to that solution, like late execution is clear win. You get initial response roughly initial response execution time almost the same as like first query. Second query in like two query solution, second query is slower than the third part because you need to use IDs, you need to query database to get like entities and start to go through root fields. So thinking as evolutionary path to what you can do right now. Delayed execution is like clear win without any like losing thing. But,
yeah, I agree. It's either of the solutions proposed are an improvement over the status quo.
no, actually, like early execution is not.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, because early execution means in the two query situation, that first query is going to come back slower, potentially.
Potentially, yeah, there is a chance. So on what basis? For some people, it would be like for some use cases, it would be not as a clear win.
So just to take a step back, like my takeaway from the working group was that there's like servers, I think we agree like servers should have the choice of implementing both, right? Especially like multi-threaded, multi-CPU servers, stuff like that. They are probably going to want to do early execution. And so like the question is like to come back to what we want to do in the spec, right? And there was desire to keep things simple. And I don't know, I feel like that we can solve that, and then it's like not as big of an issue of like deciding what GraphQL JS does. Like that could change over time if we have like the spec
and if we
flexible
have strong,
enough, right?
And strong pressure from community,
Right. Yeah.
like if people like really would want it, and after they understand like important thing, like I thought about pause that I suggested last time, and yeah, I think I agree with Europe. It's like bad idea right now because people don't really understand like, and we don't understand. Maybe you actually like understand better because you use it in first dips, right? You did some. So I think it's interesting to have like this feedback from community. And point about multi-threading, multi-CPU. Yeah, I think there is like some interlocking can be an issue, but if you organize your system in a way that it's not an issue for you, it's like works or similar stuff. If you organize your system that way, it's not matter for you, it's a quite clear win to do like early execution in multi-CPU environment. We can actually have like a normal suggestion that is good optimization to do and clear like win.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that the way that we can implement it is just that we can describe it as early execution, but say like, here's the delay, here's where you delay for X amount of time if you want delayed execution. And if you are, or the other way around. And then there's this one other function that's just its own algorithm that has a note that says, skip this if you're doing delayed execution. If you're doing early execution, follow this to make sure that error bubbling works fine. And it's going to be tricky to figure out how to do that without like functions that mutate variables, to keep it, how to do it with pure functions, but I feel like it's possible. And I want to spend some time thinking about that. Like
Yeah,
if that's like, if we come up with something, I think like, could we come up with something that follows that general direction that that you guys would agree on?
If you have resources to do that, and especially like current like algorithm, Jakub, like, do we have like algorithm for current proposal from somebody, right?
Yeah, we do have it from Yakov.
Yeah, and it's early or delayed?
It's early. There's kind of his does have like quite a bit of changes, I think, because it describes like in very high detail like exactly how the payloads have to be handled, and which I think might be like more detail than we need in the spec. And because of that, there's like some mutation happening between different functions. So I'm wondering like if we can simplify that and get something that everyone agrees on.
Yeah,
I
agree.
What do you think, Benji? Or are you skeptical that that's possible?
Well, one of the more interesting things that came out of the discussion last Thursday was Lee's statement that he was surprised that it was easier to specify the delayed execution than the early execution. And it might be that Lee's still thinking of defer and stream in terms of the existing algorithm, i.e. re-evaluating the entire selection sets, which would make sense, right? Because then it would be simpler to just use the existing algorithm because you just run the selection set and you're done. But since that's effectively not what we're proposing anymore, I would be very interested to see an algorithm for early execution that doesn't have the mutation that we currently see in Yakov's proposal. I had a go at writing up the deferred execution solution as spec edits. So I've just posted a compare of that into the chat. Now, I should point out that this is not finished. It's not ready yet. Also, I've based this on a branch that I've called Incremental Common, because it turns out that a bunch of my different goes at this all need like similar core algorithm changes to the spec, which are very similar to the ones that Yakov has already proposed in the collect, was it collect subfields or something like that? He did as a pull request. So I commented on that pull request recently, just a few days ago, with my changes, which Yakov has looked over and thinks would be good. So we'll I'll look at raising that as a separate PR as well. But yeah, assuming that we make those changes and we effectively move over from execute selection set to execute merged field set, or whatever it's called now, then the deferred execution is actually pretty straightforward. I think it's mostly the management of how we group it up and send it over. Well, I want to say send over the wire, but obviously the spec doesn't care about that. But how we group it up and build those final response datas, that is the more complex piece of code.
Yeah, and I just want to call out, maybe you're aware of this, but I see you have path as an argument in collect fields, and in GraphQL JS, path is memoized. I mean, collect fields is memoized in a way that passing path to it would break the memoization. And
Yes.
I think that's also where a fair amount of the additional complexity that comes in Yakov's changes, because he was avoiding that.
That is a good point, and it was something I was already aware of, and it might actually be why I haven't yet proposed these. I haven't raised any pull requests for these yet. They're just branches that I'm working on. So it might be that that's one of the things I was planning to revisit. I don't have my notes open, so I'm not sure, but that would make sense.
It said that JavaScript have proposal for tuples and for like with I forget how it's called, like tuples and frozen like objects, which is guaranteed to be unique, the same as string in implementation. That would solve, like, if we did like since path is basically immutable, it's like linked list, and you just add like stuff, so it would like fully solve this issue. It's
well, the issue is not that path is immutable or not. It's that when you have an array and you are completing the fields for every element in the array, the path, because there's no path in collect fields, it doesn't rerun collect fields for every array element. But if you had path in there, then the path of the array element would be would make the path different, right?
Okay. Yeah, so it's not about like comparison, equality of paths. It's yeah. Oh, interesting.
And even if it's like several layers deep inside of the array, its collect fields has the same arguments for an object 5 levels down. So it's memoized there too. It's not like specifically like the array element. It's every field under the array too.
Yeah, I'm interested on the like interesting project. I'm not ready to share what it's about, but interesting thing I noticed for like totally different unrelated reason is that we kind of have static path except like arrays. So for me, I'm playing with the idea to have like actually two paths. One is like path inside the query, and obviously query don't have like a syntax for arrays. there is no difference between object and array of objects. You have like curly braces. So I have like two paths. One path is static in query, and another path is just like set of array indexes. And that would basically solve it. It's like big change for GraphQL.js, but having like two separate paths, one for like placing a query and collect fields. Yeah, you're right. It's not depend on the like arrays, even if arrays happening outside everything. Skip include everything is not. It's like per query. All decisions are made per query. Per query and per response type in case of abstract. So it's only like two inputs. So yeah, maybe in algorithms we figure out like how to use just query path, not response. Oh yeah, I came up with a good name: query path and response path.
So I have the same need, Ivan, and I called it operation path because query is overused. But yeah, and it's for me, it was based on the operation expressions RFC that I raised a while back. That's based on the schema coordinates. So it's effectively takes the parts that you browse through the operation to use it. But one of the important things there is that it captures the type as well. So like for polymorphism, if it could be like a cat or a dog, then the part of the path is actually like cat.name or dog.name is part of the operation path.
Okay, so in your case, yeah, in this case, like if this path is implemented, caching is trivial. So collect fields result is fully dependent on this single argument. If you put like response type, actual type, concrete type, concrete type in the path, so with the whole caching depend on this like path.
Yeah, and as for this issue with the caching of it, I'm wondering whether the collect fields that I've put into this current proposal could actually be split into two parts: a cacheable bit that actually does like the collection, and then a bit over the top of it that factors in the what I'm calling the fragment delivery groups, which is the stream and defer accommodation.
Yeah, one thing about it, about like fragment delivery groups, maybe like it's better to use label names because it's like more like first we'll use label names grouping, and second it would be like more explicit how you want to group fields.
Well, we can't rely on labels existing, right? Because in general, they're just null.
Yeah, so if you don't specify labels, everything must do one thing. If you specify like label, all fragments with the same label meshed together. If you want something separate, you create two separate labels. Yeah, what way?
Yeah,
like
I think with the new format, like we can use the fragments to do it. There isn't like a lot of overhead from having fragments that way, and yeah, and I kind of like that the labels are just purely informational and don't change the algorithm, especially since they're optional.
Honestly,
maybe.
it doesn't make a lot of difference to the algorithm.
Yeah.
I'd keep it as currently proposed.
Okay. Yeah, I just thought like what way you don't need to split collect fields. You don't need to mess with like fragments after you do collect field, but yeah, I agree. Yeah, maybe like in that case, you're worried that fragments will clash, fragment names will clash. In proposal where everything controlled by fragments, we can also enforce label uniqueness, which is a good thing. So yeah, it was like just brainstorming on how to avoid splitting collect fields.
I think either way, you need to split it because you need to group them somehow. And you need to keep track of stuff coming from above, and that's why it's easy to pass path into collect fields. But yeah.
We need to preserve labels in any way, just to inform like client where something is a label is delivered, right? It just like in current proposal, you need to preserve two things. You need to preserve like group stuff under, yeah, it's basically like, yeah, maybe it's the same eventually. You just name the group. No, you will have like groups without a label and groups with a label. Okay. And it would be separate unnamed groups. Unlabeled. Yeah, I need to like disregard it. It's unrelated. I will think about this. Yeah, it's not related to early and delayed execution.
So to circle back to the beginning of the conversation, I still find myself of the opinion that just deferred execution is probably sufficient for most people, and that actually early execution it optimizes some things at the cost of others, and it would only be suitable to be used in certain circumstances where you fully understand exactly what your infrastructure is doing, because the queues and things that could be involved could come from anywhere. They could come from your kernel, they could come from the programming language itself, whether it's single or multi-threaded, could come from mutexes, they could come from remote services, databases, they could come from the file system. There's so many places that queues like that could cause that initial payload to be delayed. I think the predictability of having a deferred execute is pretty straightforward. It just says this stuff isn't going to be executed until after the other stuff has been. Simple as that, basically. So I still would push for that, but if we're pushing for that, then I think that we should put some guidance in the spec to say, once you're 2 or 3 levels deep, you probably just want to inline everything at that point. Because I think having 15 levels deep of defer, if you're doing delayed execution, could potentially lead to a very significant increase in the total query time, the total request time, sorry. And I've not seen a use case for nested defer more than really 2 levels deep. I don't think there's that. Originally, I didn't really think there was one for more than 1, but I think I came up with one for the widgets page. But honestly, I've not seen any that have been where more than 2 levels of defer is actually a valuable thing that justifies the complexity or the performance cost.
I can come up with small use cases. Today I explained my girlfriend, she's like doing manual learning how to do automatization QA testing. and I try to explain what single page application is and how they're working. So we did like some experimentation with Gmail. I use Gmail as example. And I restrict like internet, and what's happening with Gmail, it's like a first level, it's showing you your basic info. Second level, it's rendering email list. And third level, it's rendering attachments per email. Attachments, file attached per email in email list. So in Gmail, you can look at the list of emails, and if somebody sends you a PDF, you can click them. So Gmail do progressive loading like with three layers. But yeah, I think it's one of the extreme cases. So I would say like 3-5 is normal, but more than that, it's like I also don't see big use cases. But in the wild, there is like Gmail doing pre-loads.
Yeah, and I'm definitely not saying that this would be a hard preset limit that we would write into the spec. It would be more of a recommendation.
Yeah.
Make this a configuration parameter for your implementation. So Google's Gmail would, for example, just set it to 3 because it thinks that's a reasonable trade-off there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
we
why
can-
I think the spec should just say that any defer can be inlined, and then you know, even if we don't know what the best practices are right away, different scenarios will come up. We could always like change the best practices, but you're not going to have any clients depending on any specific behavior.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think that's really, really important.
Yeah, in
And-
general, spec ignored like query complexity. It's possible, but it's ignored in a sense. Nothing says about like number of fields you should support it, and like other way you can do denial of service attacks. So maybe it's not worth to mention it at all and see how critical it is.
Yeah, I agree in general, actually. It needs mentioning somewhere, but maybe the spec is not the right place for it.
Yeah, we have to make clear that like having there is an overhead cost of deferred. So it's not just a shortcut to make things. It's not just to automatically make things faster, and you can't just
Yeah.
add it like crazy and expect things to improve.
Yeah, we can do it. Just don't frame it like security issue. I'm worried it will be like a little bit weird. Like the whole GraphQL have problems with denial of service. Not problems, new challenges, I would say. Like, so if we speak just about stream and defer, if you like put in a spec don't have anything about anything else, there is no like security consideration like appendix or anything, and we suddenly put this thing for one feature, it creates illusions that this particular feature is problematic. I think we either need to write like some appendix and explaining it's not like problems with GraphQL, it's like challenges implementing GraphQL for like public APIs or APIs that you don't have control over queries. But we should not put it for particular feature because it's weird. If without context, if I just view like a PR that adds it, I will assume it's like go-to type of mechanism. So it's there, but it's like problematic mechanism, and I should like strongly consider before using it. So that's why I wouldn't mention like security as a problem for one particular feature. Let's say like I like your way you formulated it. It's not free thing. is like adding like defer anyway, make your overall query longer. Early execution, delayed execution, it will always be longer overall because of additional computation. How much longer, it's like a question, but it will be always, you always pay a price for specifying defer. So in that formulation, there is no like security, it's like trade-off of using this feature, which is similar to async await, for example. It's like, if you do something asynchronously, you adding like CPU expenses.
Yeah, makes sense to me. So a unrelated note, before we break. I'm expecting a new baby later this week.
Oh,
So I think that I'm going to cancel the next 3 meetings. Well, then we'll pick back up the first Monday of August.
yeah, it's great. And best case scenario, you will have something to present on working group. But honestly, don't compare to having it's your first child or it's
Second,
like
second.
yeah, you know what you're doing, but it's probably still stressful. So like compared to that, it's less important, definitely. One thing, you will cancel like events, right? So everybody will be
Yeah,
informed.
Hugh still controls the calendar invite, so I'll send him a message and let him know to cancel them.
Yeah.
Awesome. Congratulations, Rob.
Thanks.
Hope everything goes smoothly.
Yeah, thanks. All right. Anything else that we wanted to talk about today?
Yeah, everything is good, and we have like a very good news at the end. So good ending. And it's, by the way, it's on YouTube, so like it's not only 3 of us, but probably like 50 more people who will watch.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I'll let you know to cancel those next 3 meetings, and I'll see you guys in August then.
All right. See you in August. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.